Can you tell us the story of going to the studio?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's probably not a lot what's the way to say it? Like, I didn't see much of the studio.
Just walk us through. Just regale us. Tell us what his hand felt like when you shook it.
You walk in. I mean, if you can see, there's a picture of me on our Instagram account of in the entryway. So we're in front of the like Ludin statue,
where everybody has taken a photo with the exact same slightly green lighting. Visited the studio.
I was in that lighting.
Wow.
It's actually it's really cool though, because you step in that area. It's a very long hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got that, kind of like that real stark lighting going on.
Yeah.
The Ludens thing in there, it feels like you're walking into like a space station, even without this sort of like astronaut standing in the middle of the room.
Airlock.
Yeah. But so it has that kind of like space station feel to it. But then we walk through the other side, and then that's basically where my time in the studio, like that's as far as I got. There are a couple meeting rooms that we
really?
that we did our interviews in. So
wow.
I got to see that that entryway, and it's pretty cool.
And did you get to play the game or see the game or anything there?
No, I mean I didn't get to do any like hands-on stuff or anything like that.
Okay. Did you see any developers? Did they look tired?
No.
Okay. How was Kojima's tone throughout the interview?
He was surprisingly like friendly, and I guess there's part of me. I interviewed him before years ago
for Death Stranding.
No, like for the interview section of our magazine.
Oh,
so
I
this
see.
would have been back in like, I don't know, probably like 2006 or 2007.
And that's the only time you've met him?
Yes, the only time I've met him in like face to face.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've seen him at events and stuff before.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Like that's so.
I remember you went to like the Koji Pro LA opening. I assumed he was there.
Exactly. Yeah, he was, but
Okay.
I didn't walk up and shake his hand and say like
in the middle of his speech.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So my memory of him was being in that initial interview was being sort of like soft spoken and very precise, and he just seemed very like passionate and friendly in this newer one. So
nice.
It's sort of like it sort of ran counter to the way that I had expected. When you have sort of like an industry legend like him, you almost expect him to sort of sit back and stroke his chin and say something profound. And it was just it just felt very, I don't know, he was very animated and friendly.
Which is helpful because your interview on the site, it can come across, I love it. It's a great interview, but I feel like at times it can come across a little bit like, how much is this guy up his own butt here? Like, how much is he, you know?
When you read that interview, you should not read it as him like some aloof genius proclaiming from a throne, right? We were just, it's like some dude sitting at a table, just like talking about a game that he seems very excited about.
Just two cool bros hanging out at the table.
Take that, Jeff Keighley.
BFFs now.
Were you flattered when he said, quote, I can FaceTime you anytime?
I was like, yeah, you want my number?
So right now, if I see your cup, I can phone you and say, hey, what's this cup for?
Yeah.
But in Death Stranding, you can't.
Yeah.
You have to think about it.
Yeah. So you say that to make it sound silly.
I know,
but
exactly.
It's actually part of a really interesting answer.
Please expand on that.
Because like what he's talking about is sort of the feeling of communication in the game.
Yes.
Which a lot of times when you're communicating with other players in like modern games, you're just on chat talking back and forth and like, hey, look what I did. Like we're fighting a boss right now.
Yeah.
And what he was drawing a parallel to was the idea of like say 100 years ago in a war, a husband is like writing a letter to his wife and it's like, well, there's a battle coming tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to survive.
Yeah.
And he sends the letter and it takes 2 months to get there. And then his wife reads the letter and is like, did he make it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this sense of, even though she's interacting with that in her present, she doesn't necessarily know the circumstances surrounding it or what's happened since or things like that. So he's talking about this in terms, like that's a sense that you actually don't get in games anymore because, or even if you ever did, but I guess in modern communication, the idea is that it's always instantaneous. So Death Stranding is kind of like an intentional throttling of instant communication to make it more indirect.
Now, since you're building up this chiral network, and when you're in an area that has the chiral network, you can literally see the dividing line between chunks of the world that don't. And when you're in the chiral network, you can use the chiral printer, which is like a 3D printer, and the chiral graph and all this stuff. So is that type of communication that he's talking about just like when you're outside the chiral network, or even within the chiral network?
It's within the chiral network, even though I think within the network you are able, Sam as a character within the world is able to like talk to people.
Yeah.
That's how you see the like other players impacting your world.
Right.
So if I understand what happened in that gameplay demo correctly, when Sam first used his ladder to like cross a gap, he goes and then he talks to someone and reconnects the chiral network for that area.
Was that the musician guy?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes. I think that was him.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So then when he reconnects the chiral network for the area, then he goes back and there's another ladder over that gap. I think that's what that means, is that like when you're in an unconnected area, you may not see other players' objects.
Right.
And then once it's connected, then you do. So but the thing with the cup is he said cup because there's just a cup in front of him on the table, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, instead of him just calling and saying like, hey, what's this cup for? Or you're playing the game and, hey, buddy, I see your cup. What's going on here? The idea is that like you don't know anything about the context of surrounding the objects that were placed, or when, or why, or what the player was dealing with. So one of those things might be like, let's say that you load yourself up with packages, but then you get chased by some marauders or something out in the wilderness, and you're carrying too much, and you need to gain ground, so you have to like jettison some packages that you're carrying. Then another player might see those populate in his world, and then you're wondering like, why are these packages laying here? What hardship did this other player encounter that they needed to like ditch their cargo?
And I think that level of kind of sitting back and reflecting and wondering is core to Death Stranding. Like Kojima, he almost got the most excited during that gameplay demo when you come up over a hill and you see Port Knot City, is that the name of it?
Or Edge Knot City? I don't remember which
I think
one.
this one was Port Knot.
Okay.
So you see Port Knot City, and then you're walking down this hill, and he's like, this is the moment where everybody cries. He literally says it because it's playing a song. It's very Red Dead, right? It's like seeing something new. They play this song, and he's like, I just want players to feel like they're connected subtly to every other player who's also slowly walking down this hill. Yeah. Please don't take the motorcycle down this hill because you'll ruin the experience. Okay, got it, buddy.
Or your hoverboard.
Right. Yeah, which is also very fun. Kim, you're welcome to tell us to shut up at any moment if we go too deep on this stuff. But okay, the interview here. This part is interesting to me. It makes me laugh. So he says, there's actually 3 steps to the chiral network. For Bridge's sake, you're connecting from east to west, and they want you to join the UCA, the United Cities of America. When you connect, you can use UCA services, but at the same time, they're retrieving your information 24 hours a day. It's like 1984. Some people may not like that and say, I'm not going to connect to the UCA because we're going to repeat the same thing that we did, like Trump or the EU, these things. It's a metaphor. However, if you get really close, they start to say, okay, I'll connect.
Yeah.
And I saw like some people write, some other sites, you know how the internet is. They wrote sites about like Death Stranding's a big metaphor about Trump. Kojima says, it was like, well, not exactly.
No, I mean, the context of that is like the reason people are hesitant to connect is because of the specter of some mistakes that were made in the past.
Yes.
And though the game isn't explicitly saying Trump and the EU, those are things that that we as players in our current reality would project onto that, I think.
Right. And just that idea of look where society has gone before. If we rebuild society, won't it go in the exact same direction again?
Right.
Instead, let's stay disconnected and just like each other's bridges. The way we're supposed to be. And then I love this bit. I won't read it all for Kim's sake, but how he's talking about like the concept hasn't changed. But I love specifically when he's talking about how he had a really tough time pitching it to staff, that a lot of the staff with the original pitch was like, this is dumb. Yeah. And he had to really convince them over a long period of time. I love when developers open up on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then this is the last quote. I'm going to okay, good. I'm going to impersonate Joe Juba here.
Uh-oh.
He says, have you explained Death Stranding to anyone and had it click immediately instead of taking a while to understand? And then Kojima responds, yes, there were some people, especially creators, were quite quick to click. That's impossible to say. Like director George Miller, who is my kind of mentor. My God.
It should be who is kind of my mentor.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You transcribed this. In 2017, I went to Australia. I only had a trailer, and I also explained verbally to him. George Miller said, in all respects, you are correct. Mathematically, psychologically, physically, philosophically. He kind of started to draw a diagram. He has his theory. So he said, what you're trying to do is correct. I should have recorded that. I should have sent it to the staff. That was really a happy moment.
Yeah.
Maybe not people in the game industry, but musicians, directors, and creators connect to the work. So that's why I tend to kind of overlap with musicians and film directors more than the game industry people, because they kind of tend to synthesize with me in that way and click faster.
Yeah.
He's a level beyond us, everybody. Beyond the game industry.
I don't think that's necessarily
I know. I'm projecting a haughtiness about that. But
yeah. Well, and again, because I was in the room, like, the tone of that did not come off as haughty. And
right.
It does not sound like he's name-dropping George Miller, for instance.
A little bit. But still, it's nice.
No, actually what happened for that was he gave the first part of the answer, and then his assistant said George Miller, and then he says George Miller is
there. We go. Interesting.
So like he did not immediately go to let me tell you about my good friend George Miller.
Right. Which is why we should post all interview audio like we're going to do in the back half of this episode of the Game Informer Show podcast with Infinity Ward. Helps deliver the tone.
So anyway, this one, I guess that. I liked that answer.
Yeah. What are you debating?
So here's what I'm spinning around in my head is just the idea of how to articulate the way that it in the moment did not come off as haughty, because
I
can see those. I think it's partially just more like the idea that he is in Death Stranding specifically, he's definitely dealing, I think, with some strange thematic things. And even though he's delivering these through gameplay, Death Stranding does not feel to me like a game that at the outset was how do we make mechanically a game that people really want to play.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It's more about, it seems like it's a game that's about delivering an experience and less about the sort of nitty-gritty of what it's like to play a game.
Right. He's not focusing on enjoyable gameplay.
So I guess in that way, in the moment, it made more sense that dealing with that these concepts would make more sense to people who are generally dealing more in ideas like that, rather than game developers who sort of first and foremost are thinking designing a game.
Yes, absolutely. Again, your review, or your review. Your interview is on GameInformer.com. Read the whole thing. It's fascinating. Any other highlights, any anecdotes, any jokes Kojima made that weren't in the interview?
Let's see.
What did he smell like?
God. I'm not answering.
That's it. All right, we hit Kim's limit. That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.